Welcome everyone. We are welcoming today the Chris Obermeier. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the show. Can you please tell us about yourself and why should people listen to the podcast?
Yeah, for sure, Nick. I'm Chris Obermeier. I spend most of my career leading engineering and platform teams. A lot of my work has been focused on taking on technologies like machine learning and AI, and really embedding them into production systems, which
hmm
improve real workflows, and they have to operate in well-regulated environments. So lots of governance, lots of the dirty stuff that artificial intelligence is sort of doing and working with a lot of people that may not want to do it at the beginning. And you have to figure out how to augment them and get on their side and sort of figure out how to go through that human aspect and emotional intelligence sort of journey as well.
Awesome. AI is everywhere right now. So it's very nice when we have somebody from the field that has actually been doing and implementing things. And, judging by your career, by your experience, I think it's going to be a crazy good episode, full of practical advice and learnings. So in your past, I saw that you shipped AI in production at multiple companies, Johnson Controls, Rocket Mortgage, Expanse. I mean, it's building, capital markets, mortgage documents. It's three distinct industries. What's the thorough line that you've seen in terms of how you personally think about what AI is actually for inside a large enterprise? Why does a large enterprise need AI? And because you've seen so many of them and you've done it yourself.
Yeah, I think it becomes most important when it's actually part of the decision loop, which seems sort of obvious, but it isn't for a lot of times. A lot of people talk about bolting on AI, or they don't say it that way, but they want to do AI, which we can get to later. But Johnson Controls, it was how do we make buildings automated? And it wasn't just like monitoring things, but how can you actually in real time optimize the use of energy and maintenance and things like that. In Rocket
Mhm.
Mortgage, it was how do you come to market and monitor and make pricing decisions that fed directly into the origination system. And at Expanse, it was how do we check documents so that we can make sure people are getting their information in on time and you can sort of push them through the process and get them loans quicker. So in all cases, it really helped because it was part of the core system and it really enabled how the decisions were made at the architecture level.
I see. Did you primarily angle for the decisions within your own company, or there was also to help users with the decision? Because I've seen a bunch of enterprises that they're thinking about that as well.
Yeah, so in this case, they were decisions that were made within the company, but it involved information from all over. So, like in the case of mortgage companies, you're working with Freddie and Fannie, you're working with market information, whether that's pricing, whether that's just gathering market trends, sentiment, everything around there, really
hmm
pulling that stuff in a way that's easily consumable and repeatable. Is how we had the most value.
Okay. So a follow-up question here. For those three different use cases, they were unique and distinctive from each other because each one was solving a different problem.
Yep.
So how did you form a mental model for what good AI implementation would look like? How did it evolve? Because I imagine as you face different problems, you have the same tool. How was that evolving? How was that implementation evolving depending on the different contexts and different problems that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, I think it's honestly, I love house metaphors. So I think it's a lot like having a toolbox, and AI
hmm
is one of those tools. So I think it just came to be that way based on digging into the systems. Because there were many problems we solved that didn't use AI or didn't use ML, and it was algorithmic in approach or just creating, microservice models or reworking older things. We just found a few cases for sort of each step in each company where these problems lended themselves to it. But the definition of AI has also changed. Like machine learning at 6 years ago was sort of
hmm
AI. Some algorithms were even seen as AI and still are, quite frankly. So as things go on, you really want to use that as a tool where it makes the most sense, obviously. But I think that's where people fall into this trap of like forcing it or trying to do it
hmm
to say you did it or gain some extraordinary thing out of it. So I think that's what worked for me is that when it's come, it's those situations have lended themselves exactly to it instead of trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, so to speak.
Okay. How did that go in terms of implementing it across teams? Because you've been consistently like growing. You went from like 150 people managing at GE, then you led five national teams, then you led like four divisions at Expanse. I mean, at which point of your career did you understand that we have this AI tech, we have this technology, like it's evolving all the time? But When did you understand that the technology of AI, what AI can do, is not actually the main blocker and the main constraint? Because in my practice, like what I've seen is folks run pilots, and then those pilots fail, and they start thinking that something's wrong with the technology. But the technology is completely fine. The context is wrong. I don't know, data is wrong. Something else is wrong. So when was that moment for you when you realized, like, damn,
Yeah. I mean, it constantly happens in different ways. It happened a bit in Johnson Controls. I think the most obvious way it happened for me was at Rocket Mortgage. So we were working with bankers and very intelligent guys that have been doing this stuff for decades.
Mhm,
I really thought it was very simplistic. I was dumb, right? I didn't know what I didn't know. The Dunning-Kruger effect was in full effect. And I really thought like, oh, they're going to pull the same data every day. And then they're drinking coffee and doing this. And it's because I didn't have the understanding. So as I got in there more, I sort of understood more of what they did. And then as I did that, I realized also what their concerns were. Like they knew how complex it was that they were doing, and they thought somebody was going to come in and automate them, even though they knew it didn't make sense.
mhm,
Getting our goals aligned was huge, and having to like sit down with them. So I started shadowing a few of the more senior bankers, and then ended up having basically everybody on my teams doing it as well. And as
mhm,
soon as we did that, we started to realize how complex the problem was, where they could actually use help, and we got to learn more about the systems. And they also became more forthcoming about it, right? Because we were invested, and then that turned into our senior leadership cascading goals to us that aligned, so that we were going to succeed together. And that was when I started to realize, oh, this is a lot more about people and augmenting them, but also, getting them to a safe spot where they don't feel like they're giving up some sort of secret sauce or something. And all
mhm.
of a sudden, AI is going to do all that. One thing that I just learned about AI is it's very good at figuring out what machines do and very good at raw data. It's not good with human reasoning. It wants to sort of like fill in the gaps. And that's where you need humans, because humans created a lot of these thoughts and they're the best at evaluating a lot of the thoughts, and machines just aren't there yet.
I agree with you 100%. Like, I can tell you a lot about it because what you described is when you were shadowing bankers, basically the knowledge is in person's head.
Yeah.
It's a tribal knowledge almost because they know that in these situations we're going to do XYZ, and this is the unwritten rule that will never go into the document because it's like so obvious for the person that is managing it. And this creates this constant loop where AI just sees the raw data, and as you said, it's very hard to get the data from the person, from the human. And then it just creates this loophole that AI can't improve itself because it doesn't have the good data. So you you're actually stuck. And I'm curious on your take on this from a different angle. Let's say because a lot of folks that are listening to this, they have a lot of data that was collected over years, even decades of previous operations. And this data is messy. Nobody wants to touch it because it's all over the place in systems that has been like, centuries old. So how do you see, what did you do in the past when you had this old stack and now you have this new AI adoption? How do you actually marry two of them to have a happy marriage and do something together?
Yeah. So you mean most places you go to don't have full Snowflake implemented from 40 years ago? Yeah, that's a shame. But yeah, I think that's the first step, right? Is that you go in and you sort of take stock of where the systems are, and that's why you also don't just try to again get that bolt-on AI right away. There's a lot of modernizing legacy stacks and platforms and setting things up, but it does usually what exactly those people want to do. It speeds up their system flow. It makes things more maintainable, sustainable. You can add more functionality. Things are quicker. The accuracy is better. But a lot of times it's sort of that unsexy now transformation of a
Mm,
in a platform. So that's the first step. And then there's also, software development lifecycle stuff, and just making sure that you're, doing agile processes and you understand what it is that you're making and that you can actually get close to the requirements. And really that's what AI is, in my opinion, helping engineers do, is getting closer to the problem now that they can even set up swarms of agents to do development for them and things like that. So
mhm.
but yeah, those first steps are really figure out where that business is embedded in, where people can't just modify only a hand, like a hand.
Okay, step one.
Yeah. And then it's how do we set this up get the clean data pipelines, have event-driven architecture, have APIs, and make sure that those things are exposed so that you can grab the data sort of out of it, and then start to build on those new technologies like machine learning and AI.
Hmm.
And then you're able to unlock that innovation. And people will start to see it as they do that. But yeah, so many times it's just only these three people can even do this because it's written in procedurally generated code that is all batch jobs, and these are the only people that know how it works. So it's scary.
I have a little follow-up question here. So would there be a merit in doing also a transition of the data, doing a migration to something that will communicate with AI more natively? So for example, right now, while you're on there, while you're cleaning these data pipelines, while you're identifying which is the most important, which one is not, is there a merit of doing that transition of this data to somewhere more modern, or it's going to be a completely different issue and it's better not to tackle that?
I guess it depends, right? And like everything, there's trade-offs and what it is that you're trying to accomplish. I think sometimes as engineers, we get a bad rap because we want to make everything perfect. We want to plate everything, but it does matter. I think what is it at the very base of what your goal is? Are you trying to? Do you think this is something that's going to make your company this much better in the secret sauce? Then yeah, you probably want to jump into it right away. Just like if you were doing like machine learning, you want to get on Databricks, right?
Yeah.
If everything you're doing is reporting and analytics, you want to be on Snowflake so you can run clusters. So it really depends. But I think at the beginning, really, you can find the 80-20 rule and sort of pull out
Uh-huh.
what is the low hanging fruit. And you just need to clean that segment and that run. But as we know it, what comes in goes out. If you have good data coming in and that workflow, and you can like keep that in just that workflow, I think showing that for success does earn you a lot of sort of street cred within the organization and within the other teams. So sometimes that's the better way to do it, is sort of slowly build it out as opposed to just coming in one day and mandating everything's in Snowflake. Because if you do that too, you're going to find out that you put all of this stuff in a really good structure and then the schema goes away or it changes 18 times. So it
Cool.
depends.
What I like the most about this format of podcasting is when guests can tell a lot of interesting stories, because stories and those, they really resonate with a lot of folks. Do you remember, besides that situation that you described with the banker, in your experience, do you remember when you had this interesting AI initiative or ML initiative, and then it failed, but the problem wasn't the tag, something else was the problem, like organizational level. Do you have a cool story that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, so I can tell you, I won't say where this was again, but there was an initiative where we were working on data extraction and classification, and there we were not getting the results we wanted to. Like everybody wants to get to 99.9, say all the
Hmm.
nines accuracy so that you can remove humans out of the loop. But sort of like I spoke about earlier, I think the guidance of you wanted to completely remove humans from the decision making was misguided, because it wasn't, again, going to be able to allow you to make the right decision. So from the get go, it was sort of a fool's errand. And none of us really knew that that was the thing. It was more nuanced into, we want to lower the amount of people that need to do sort of a stare and compare notice on what the documents say and what we expect them to say, which makes complete sense.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, grabbing that data, highlighting where we have those concerns, feeding them with all of the context behind it, so all that background work is done, and it's presented in a very simple way to a user, that
Hmm.
makes a lot of sense. When you try to get rid of that last set, though, you're going to hurt the accuracy because the models
I
are
see.
going to see it's going to do the model thinks you want it to do.
Hmm.
So in this case, it started to go backwards, and it really frustrated the people that were expecting it to do something else.
Okay. A follow-up question on this decisioning. So let's say in your experience, you work with a bunch of regulatory tight industries. So let's think about this. Let's say financial services or healthcare or any other regulated industry. I imagine that whenever you come internally and you want to pitch an AI project, and it sounds like you are outsourcing reasoning or decisioning to an AI model, and then there can be some consequences. I imagine that a lot of leaders, they become really protective and defensive. So, what have you seen work in the past? What kind of pitch can engineer do in order to convey that we should do this project?
Yeah, I think if you go and you say, "Hey, let's do AI," it is my favorite phrase to say and my worst to hear sort of a deal, right? Is if you pitch to a group that we're going to do it, but you leave it very open as to what's happening, or you
Hmm.
just say, go do it, and then we'll meet back, it tends to fall apart because there's no guardrails. Nobody is aligned as to what is happening, and you aren't going to really figure out a way to be effective that way. But if you can say, we want to work toward this outcome, and that's a shared goal in between the groups, then
Hmm.
that's where it can be very effective because everybody at the end of the day is expected to do something together. But also, then, like I was sort of alluding to earlier, it doesn't need to always be AI. Like it can be a part of it, and it
Hmm.
is nowadays, especially if the systems haven't been touched in a while. But I think it aligns everybody together and it starts that frame of let's go solve a problem together, the classic whiteboarding in a room. And that's
Hmm.
where it works.
Hmm.
But if it's, hey, this team is going to come and do AI to your team, like any top down things with very intelligent people, they're going to get disengaged and they're not going to want to make these things work. So that's what I've seen from kicking off right away what makes things successful. Or
Yeah, I agree with you. I in the beginning of February was the conference in London, and I've been on a couple of panels. There were a lot of leaders from banking industry were sharing about their AI pilots, about their things that they were doing. And one narrative that everybody was agreeing on is that if somebody has a genius idea to do AI for something, and then they do this AI, and even a miracle, okay, it worked for at the scale of the team, it almost never was able to scale to the whole organization. And the only scenario when this thing worked is when, let's say, head of digital transformation or head of IT or whoever comes to a specific department, sits down with them with a pen and paper, like, hey, what are your problems? Okay, one, two, three, four. Okay. And then he goes back to his team. They circle back. How can we solve this? And if one of the technologies that can solve this was AI, great. We're implementing AI here. And that's everybody is giving a sign off on that.
yeah, I think that's dead on. And I think that honestly is because when you involve people that know the systems and that have been doing this for a while, they're going to tell you, nobody's going to tell you something I think that much different from what I'm going to. And it's not because I'm the smartest guy in the room. It's because that's what you need to make it work. And if you have full embodiment into what the initiative is and what you're going to do at a system level, then it scales. But if you make these proof of concepts in a bubble and you don't know how the rest of the system works and you don't build it into your core operating model, then all of these other things, like when you actually push it to enterprise, especially in like banking and highly regulated environments, somebody goes, that's great. But now you just sent this agent out and I have no idea what it did. I can't reproduce it. I have no way of sort of validating that it even didn't violate the law in what it was looking up and doing. And when I want to re-show it or regenerate these solutions, I can't do it again. So now I can't audit it and I don't fall under any of the compliance laws. That's where things fall apart. But I think again, there's a lot of work going on in that area. But I think if you start with that from the beginning, then you're there. It's just fighting that urge to try to go from 0 to 100 immediate and gain, claim that you've increased value by 10,000%, and also really taking a look at your system model. And that's indicative on people like us to have those conversations with people right off the bat and instead of surprising them with it on the back end.
Okay. Let's talk about prioritization. I'm curious, in your experience, when you have like a large engineering organization under you and you have to keep the current and legacy stack running and live, and then you have to implement these new things. And we can even take it to the another extreme. Like, imagine that there is investors are coming to the business leaders are saying, hey, we need AI. Business leaders are coming to their engineering leaders like, hey, we need AI. Now this imaginative engineering lead, he has his own stuff to do. Plus, he has a pressure from the leadership. We need to put and implement AI somewhere. So, how do you draw a line in terms of prioritization? How many resources we assign to keeping things as they are versus implementing this AI? How did you tackle this in the past, and what would you recommend to this imaginative person?
Yeah. So this is, I think, where it does go back to making sure your software development lifecycle is strong so that you can even intelligently have that conversation about this is how much capacity I have, and this is where people and their teams are focused on. So
Hmm.
that you can say, hey, do you want more short-term enhancements? Do you want more break fix things, keep the lights on, which nobody's going to say we want more to keep the lights on. But, you know, do you want more or less risk assumed, right? Because that's also a lever to pull. We can test more, we could test less, and everything else. If you don't have that, it's going to be really hard to get away from the classic do it 2 times faster for 2 times cheaper, or even now it seems like it's 10 times faster for 10 times cheaper.
Hmm. Hmm.
Cut so you only have 10% of the people and you do 10 times as much as you used to. But it all starts, I think, with basic metrics and agreed upon what it looks like to succeed for all of you in your roles. Once you align to that, then you can start to move those other levers. And I think it's really measuring the output and the outcomes that you're generating. So if previously you were doing X amount of work and the value was driving X amount of money through the funnel, and now
Hmm.
it's doing different, then you have a good model. Where people, I think, get in the trap that art technologists are, hey, I want to increase the velocity of this team from 30 points to 50 points. And as we all know in software development, it might as well be bananas versus squirrels. And
Hmm.
they start comparing teams and things against each other. So I think if you can get away from those and set up that good agile practice and keep the goals toward the outcomes and fight the urge to sort of try to micromanage or look at sometimes pre-leading indicators and looking at true leading indicators, then I think it's easier to have those conversations and set those things up.
Chris, a follow-up question here. In your past experience, you probably built models, things that work great in paper, but when you see how they work in implementation, you understood that, well, those models are not so great because people are finding different workarounds, loopholes, or they constantly complain that something's not working, or maybe compliance is flagging for you. In your experience, how did you deal with that? So, what was going on in your head in those moments when you see that technically on paper everything should be correct, but in practice, in reality, it doesn't really match what you planned or what you envisioned for this project?
Yeah, so that happens quite often actually.
Yeah.
It's funny because you get really excited at first because you see all of your metrics showing that your model's working a lot better. A lot of times it's when there's bigger jumps. So now that I've seen it a few times, I react differently than the first time. I used to be
Hmm.
super excited, and now I'm very cautious as to why it could possibly be doing that. It's usually because you're overfitting the model or you're not taking into account some of these sort of edge cases. So a lot of it is really just being able to test it quickly, having good ML ops, being able to
Hmm.
pull those things in quick, and then also slowly bleed them into production. You don't have to make it one model or the other. You can
Hmm.
put one in production for just a small period of time. So that way you can still run it against whatever your set is that you've been testing things against, and then actually let it go live for a certain amount, like siphon things toward it and then see how it reacts in real time. But yeah, it's a pretty common problem to have. My whole recommendation for anybody going through it is slowly ease it in. You
Hmm.
don't have to just draw a line. But yeah, I don't think people are trying to, in my case, circumvent anything. They're just continuing to act as they are. And it's the way that it's testing and the way it's coming out more positive is because it's not putting a lot of those edge cases into the fact. What usually is the good thing that happens after it, though, is then you can see what the difference is when you do identify, hey, this model looks like it was going to be really good, and then it wasn't. What
Hmm.
was the delta in between the two models? What was missed? And usually the next one after that is usually the better one.
Yeah, I agree. Usually, like in a lot of companies where AI never really becomes a thing, that's the stage where those pilots or those tests or trials they get stuck into because the company really never finds a way. How do we scale this specific thing into production? Or maybe, I don't know, decision is not there. Like the leadership is questioning, okay, so if we're going to run this on all our whole data, like what's going to happen then? And I've seen a lot of companies, they stop there. So, in your experience, what is the main difference between those companies that actually are successful with AI, that are able to scale it into production, and those companies that unfortunately are not? Is there a problem in the way that they're doing the technical implementation? Is it, case by case? Is there any pattern that you can see?
It's funny, the pattern I always say is, well, if you want it in production, put it in production, which
Mm.
obviously is a little cheeky and you have to get to that point, have to have the infrastructure behind it. But it's really the mindset at a certain point. If you really do commit to doing it and you want to
Hmm.
do it the right way, then build things like that's what you're going to do. But if you sort of half ass it, I'll say, then it's not going to actually work because you're always sort of, there's a caveat. Well, we'll do this, but so if
Hmm.
you actually want something to live in production, then build it from day one like it's going to do that. But if you treat it as an afterthought, then that's how it will be made, and that's how it will be perceived by the people that use it as well. So you have to figure out again, how can you make it a part of the system? How do you make it sort of AI native or at least AI constructed for
Mm-hmm.
the platform as opposed to a bolt on? So again, that's having good ML ops, of course, to be able to do that, being able to turn things on and off, being able to scale the amount of AI that's being used, and then communicating that well to leadership. And then also from a technical leader, being able to communicate that up and down to your teams. So sometimes that
Mm-hmm.
might be where, like, sort of like I was alluding to before, maybe only 1% is going to go through in production to like let people sort of be okay with it, but also setting in good fail safes and guardrails so that if
Mm-hmm.
things start to go different or you do have hallucinations, which you absolutely will the first time you go to production, you'll be able to handle those edge cases. So creating something not to be perfect, but to go to production, to have fail safes, guardrails, fallbacks is really the way to do it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when I joke again, if you then put it in, like there has to be a certain amount of risk that you're willing to take. Otherwise, you'll never do it. But
Yeah.
then the risk in my mind, and my argument is always, your risk of falling behind just went up dramatically.
I could tell you an anecdote about the risk. I just had a conversation this weekend with a friend of mine. He's been telling me about the guy that he knows that runs an AI automation company, and they're very niche down. They work with a bunch of banks in Spain, and they only do work for those banks, so they don't even scale further. The way that they ensure that the model follows the guidelines, because banking is a very regulated and the cost of mistake is very high. So the way that their company ensures that the model follows actually the guidelines and everything is that whether they go to jail or not. This is the this is this is the end case, because if their motto is like, if our model doesn't follow your regulations or your yeah, I don't know, then we go to jail, and that's it. Like the skin is in the game,
Yeah,
100%.
that's really funny. I mean, that's another great answer for how people should do it, is go back to the original days of machine learning. Either it works or it doesn't, and be okay with that. Don't get too attached to any of these things. It's funny, sometimes people argue over which is better
Hmm.
when you don't have to in many cases. You can just see, did it drive more revenue? Did it complete things faster?
Hmm.
Was it cheaper cloud costs? Like, you can set very clear expectations on these things and then make the obvious decision based on them.
All right. And the closing question for the podcast, I really enjoyed it. I'm sure like you guys that are watching, if you haven't left a like, a comment, or you didn't jump on the Chris's page, this is the right time to do this right after we finish the podcast. The last question is going to be for engineers, really for everyone that has been working and they have their own way of working, of getting from point A to point B in their work. Sometimes we think ourselves only, oh damn, I need AI, I need to do this with AI. Or sometimes this comes from somebody higher. When we discussed this already, when investors tell to the business owners, hey, you need to do AI, business owners come, they tell to their VPs, we need to do AI, and that just goes all the way down. So before the person that has to do AI, whether it was their choice or not their choice, before they even go and they touch a vendor, a tool, a process, what is the first like conversation internally, externally? What kind of process they should go through in order to start working on the right thing? How do they understand, okay, in my process, in my day to day, I should focus on this. I should imply AI here because here AI will be the most efficient for whatever reason that I want to do it.
Yeah, great question. And it's something that I'm redoing with myself right now. So if people go to my LinkedIn, they'll actually see this literally right now. And I know I shared it with you just a moment ago. I'm doing proof of concepts.
Mm-hmm.
And part of it is to take these tools and see how they've evolved just over a small period of time and make sure that you're familiar with them. Because if you don't know what the tools are, when you reach into the tool bag, how do you know you're grabbing the right thing? It's like being a carpenter, except your hammer now looks like a screwdriver. It's
Mm-hmm.
changing that rapidly. So the
Yeah.
first step is really just using it and staying close. I would encourage all leaders at all levels to get their hands on keyboards and to take some time to do it. The only way you can lead people or have these conversations or actually do things is to have those tools. And I think once you have a good understanding of what you have at your disposal, then I would actually go back and just really focus on outcomes. So like scratch the itch and allow yourself to go and
Mm-hmm.
purposely use these tools, whether it's agents, whether it's, regs, whether it's like regs are changing crazy every single day, whether it's
Yeah.
LLMs. go and try to apply them to just random use cases and predetermine that that's what you're going to do, just to get your skills up and just make sure you can see how things are working and interacting, seeing where they're valuable, where they maybe aren't doing yet what you think they're going to do, and then inject yourself back into the system. And now you can think about the problems the way that you would before. So maybe before you just had a shovel and now you have a bulldozer, but you're not going to
Hmm.
do a bulldozer
Hmm.
when you need to dig a small hole in your backyard for like a sapling. But now you know when you have to build the or like put a tree in your yard, you have this bigger tool to use. And I think you'll be surprised. Eventually, you'll find a perfect area for it where you're able to implement these new tools. And then that's when it's sort of common sense. And it's got to be common sense, I think, for yourself. If you, especially if you're working in like a leadership structure, to
Yeah.
explain it to somebody else, we can all tell, right? If somebody's trying to predetermine what the outcome is before we talk
Hmm.
through.
Hmm.
So if you then can truly find a situation where it's obvious to you, and then you can figure out how to explain it to go. But yeah, otherwise the fun thing is that if you get stuck on what to learn next or what tooling or how to use it next, ask the tool. Like go into the chat and say, what can
Talk
I
with it.
yeah, this is what I've done so far. This is what my system does. This is what I'm working on. Where can I learn more? It'll lead you on the right road. But otherwise, reach out to people that you know in the industry. Like most of us are very nerdy and geeky and willing to help about this stuff. It's very enjoyable. And then, yeah, the next part, and I think this is going to be a huge part for engineering going forward, is being able to explain your case to your stakeholders as to why you should be doing these things. So where we might not be as doing as much like just creating basic frameworks for CRUD operations anymore. Now it's, talking to people and explaining to them about the benefits of the outcomes that you're going to bring and why it's important. So start to get those skills up. That would be my advice.
Percent. So, ladies and gents, if you ever wanted a sign, you were looking for the how to start, this is your sign. I'm gonna leave Chris's details. So, if you have any questions, please do reach out to him, to me. Your best thank you is gonna be engagement under these posts, likes, comments, shares with networks, and it has been a pure pleasure to talk to you, Chris, and
Absolutely. Me too. Yeah.
amazing insights.
Thanks a lot, Nick. Appreciate you.
Thank you.